Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graban. Our guest today is Michael Chaleff. He is a former naval officer, former federal prosecutor and trial attorney, and a professional magician and mentalist for more than 3 decades. His TEDx talk at Stanford is called What Magicians Know About Mistakes That You Don't, which makes him about as perfect of a guest as we could have here on the show. So, Michael, welcome. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you for having me.
There are so many directions this conversation could go. I think, I've talked to attorneys. I haven't talked to a magician, so we'll probably lean more on that. But we'll start as we always do, because I don't know what realm of your career and careers this answer will come from. What's your favorite mistake?
All right. So after the Navy, I was in the Navy for 4 years, 3 months, and 18 days. I was in the Gulf War, a lot of time at
Mm.
sea. I had about a year to kill before I went to law school. And instead of doing something rational, I decided to take my hobby at the time and say, "Oh, I'm ready to be a professional magician." And I decided that I was going to be a restaurant magician.
Okay.
And I, at the time, had no idea what I was getting myself into. And just for context, it's insane. The job is to walk up to people that have been drinking. They're perfectly happy having a conversation with each other, interrupt that conversation, hopefully get over their annoyance and get a big tip. And this is, yeah, and this is
What,
topical.
what, what kind of restaurant? I don't think I've been accosted or entertained by a magician in
Sure.
my
So,
life.
very diverse. So sometimes it could be Chili's. Sometimes it could be an El Torito. Sometimes it would be some sort of either bar or family friendly place where they would want to have it. But
Yeah.
always, I don't think I ever went to a place that didn't have alcohol. And certainly at night, people were drinking there. It's a very diverse group, which is very different approaches, but all of which in a restaurant, which means that there are children screaming and food orders are coming in the middle of your entertainment and food is rushing past you. And it's just, it is an environment that you just know mistakes are going to happen.
Mm.
And if you don't figure out how to recover from it, you're going to have a very short career. And I just was completely unprepared for what was to follow. What we're going to talk about is the first week is one of my big mistakes, but as whenever I tell this story, the one that always jumps to my mind is I literally was so, when you approach a table, particularly in the beginning, there's a lot of this, approaching a pretty girl in a restaurant, right? You're nervous, you get better at it. But in the beginning, there's this approach anxiety. And I remember I was so nervous in one instance, I literally stepped over a seeing eye dog and asked a blind man to pick a card. He just, he didn't
Yeah.
look at me. He just, in my direction, said, "I'm blind."
Yeah.
I walked away in shame. It was a low point. But I always know when anything bad happens, I have a story.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the environment. He's just a train wreck of an experience, particularly like early on. And I realized I needed to have a really good start. I needed to make sure that I could hit it out of the park early on in order to overcome all the things that I was afraid. So before I tell you the story, I got to show you the trick that I was trying to do before everything imploded. And we're gonna do it together. Now, normally I'm doing this would be doing this at a table. You have a cocktail in your hand, and I would
Sure.
have your hand. But I'm going to ask you to use your imagination. So it begins with, imagine you have a deck of cards in your hands.
Okay.
Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Awesome. It's going to be in what we call new deck order, which means all the cards in their specific order. There's spades, diamonds, clubs, and hearts. And then all of those are ace through 13. If you separated those cards into reds and blacks, which color would you put on the table in front of
This is where you want the answer. Okay. Diamond.
you? Well, you would put red cards or black cards in front of you.
Wait, I'm not with you now. Sorry. My mistake.
Running there. If we took the deck and we put all the red cards on one side and all the black cards in another, and we were going to get rid of one half of the deck, what cards would you put on the table? The red side or the black side of the deck? Which cards do you want to eliminate, reds or blacks?
Let's eliminate the black cards.
Great. Now we're going to jump ahead to what you were ahead of me. You separated what you had in your hands into diamonds and hearts. Which would you get rid of and put on the table?
I'm going to get rid of the hearts and put the diamond.
So we're left with the diamonds.
Right.
Where we started 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
Now you have 13 right?
Right.
Eight for king is 13 cards. You're going to keep one of those cards and put the 12 on the table. What is the one card that you're going to keep in your, what is the one card you're going to keep in your hand as you put the other 12 cards down on the table?
I'm going to keep the 8 of diamonds in my hand.
The 8 of diamonds. All right. Now over the last 30 years, I've done this effect. I don't know how many thousands of times, maybe.
Mhm.
And tonight, when you put your head under pillow, you're going to think, what if I had picked something other than the 8 of diamonds? So I'm going to give you the chance one time, if you want to erase everything that we've done, to think of another.
Okay. I'll take you up on that.
All right. What is the card?
The 7 of spades.
7 of spades. Perfect. So here's what I want you to do. You're going to take the 7 of spades and you're going to turn it facing in the opposite direction. So all of the cards in front of you are face up. You're going to take the 7 of spades and insert it in the deck face down and then shuffle the deck so that you don't know where the 7 of spades are. Tell me when you're done.
That probably didn't sound like card shuffling. Sorry to those with headphones on. It wasn't too loud. Okay, I've shuffled the deck.
Perfect. You have a deck of cards that has one card face down, which is the 7 of spades. And that 7 of spades, you have no idea where it is in the deck.
Okay.
Perfect. Now, for those of you that are listening, and I'm holding a deck of cards, and I've been holding a deck of cards this whole time, can you verify that, Mark?
Yes, you've been doing that. I think it's the same deck of cards. Yeah. I've been
yes.
looking. Yep.
So, and you said, what was the card that you said?
Finally or first?
The 7 of what?
The 7 of spades.
7 of spades or 7 of diamonds?
7 of spades was what I finally got to.
Now,
there's a card.
There is literally one card. Can we validate to the audience?
Yeah.
If that is the 7 of spades, would you not consider yourself the person that has viewed a miracle for the day?
I would be amazed.
Can you imagine the number of years of law school I had to endure in order to learn that it is? All right. So I'm going to tell you, I worked forever on that effect. Well, I was convinced that it made me bullet.
Yeah.
So hold that thought.
Okay.
It is now the first week that I'm doing magic. It is a brunch. I don't know why, but for some reason I have the worst luck at brunches. It is an El Torito in San Diego. I walk up to a table. It's the third table of the morning. It is a table in the corner. And I remember it to this day. It was a long table. There were people on the sides, and the person that I could tell was kind of running the show was this woman at the head of the table. And after greeting the table, I said, imagine you have a deck of cards in your hands. And she looked at me and said, I don't have hands.
Oh my, she wasn't teasing. She wasn't joking.
I know.
What?
It is the first, honestly, Mark, it is the first time in my entire adult life that I lost the ability to speak. And I felt shame. I felt guilt. I felt, I mean, it just hit me so hard. And I'd already, when we were talking about this is at the beginning. This is the beginning when I was already sort of trying to get over that stage fright, vulnerable in my approach, and walked up to the table and then got that. And I was floored. Now, whenever I tell this story, someone says, well, Michael, why didn't you just say, imagine you have hands? And honestly, in the moment, the thought came to me, but equally, as clever as that was never going to be the right answer.
Sure.
So I am traumatized.
And I'm just curious here. Sorry to interrupt you. Like, did she hold it? Like, she had her arms up to her wrist.
So here's what happens. You're jumping ahead. This is exactly what happens. Her arms are up against the table. She says this to me. I lock up what feels like forever. And then she leans back and starts to move her hands up. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to be confronted with? And she ends up placing on the table 2 perfectly manicured hands. She was just messing with me. Now this conversation happened 40 years, so like 30 to 40 years ago, this happened. And honestly, to this day, I still feel the trauma. I remember the trauma of that. I've done something bad. It was, and then you're going to ask me, well, what happened afterwards? And honestly, just like a violent getting hit by a car, I have no recollection. What
See, I've made a mistake as a host. I should have just let you tell the story instead of interjecting or guessing or asking.
you're exactly where you should be. You were exactly where you needed to be, and you are could not be more gracious, Mark. Yes, so that is what happened. Now, this story is, and I referenced this in my talk. The interesting thing about that year that I did magic in the pub was like bad things happened to me over and over and over again. And obviously, even in that wasn't a mistake on my part. But to me, a mistake is I'm confronted with having to deal with the fallout as a speaker. And so my talk is about what did I learn about all these mistakes as an entertainer and a leader, and how
Mhm,
you manage the situation. And
mhm.
to me, that has become something that I've used throughout my entire life. And to the question you didn't ask, it's like you have this diverse resume.
Yeah,
At the core of that resume is influence, right? How do you influence people in combat? How do you
right.
influence a judge or opposing counsel? How do you direct attention when you're performing, or if you're an executive coach, how do you get people to get past their own anxiety? And so I think the first step for everybody, and one of the many things why I reached out to you, because I loved the idea, and I see so many people's mistakes robbing them of power was, well, what can you do or what should you do in that moment so that you don't lose your momentum and so that you still can have influence?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
to me, that's what that was what the talk was about. And understanding that through this is sort of one of the things I do when I'm working with people, or people have come to me and said, what do I do when I screw up? And I'm like, when I talk to people a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and I do wanna dig into kind of the connections about, between being a magician and, if you will, the performance in a courtroom. I do wanna get into that, but I
Sure.
mean, just going back to your story for a minute, would you frame the mistake as not having game planned? What happens if somebody messes with you or somebody legitimately does not have hands? I mean,
Sure. So I think technically, if someone said, Did I make a mistake?" I didn't make a mistake in in what I did, right?
right,
There was no intention, like, and
right,
that's perfectly appropriate in that context. And so when I think of mistakes, right? Because I'm normally talking to people that are performing or presenting or speaking or storytelling. I normally think of a mistake as something, even if you're not responsible for it, if somebody does or says something in the audience stupid, you're still responsible for figuring out how to make everyone comfortable, or so that you land the plane, so to speak.
sure.
And in that instance that you said, which I think is a great question, and I may tell you another story that directly relates to this
Mm,
later in the conversation. But what would I do today? Honestly, today I would have just said, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing," and I would have made a joke about it and gotten really curious.
yeah,
I would have said, "You know what? Today I wouldn't have imagined stepping in something that horrible." And because it was such a sensitive topic, right? Until she had done the reveal, I would have asked her, said, "Well, how should we proceed?" Just out of really being curious.
yeah,
The big secret, the big reveal, I talk about this in my TED talk, is if you make a mistake, don't draw attention to it, right? There's no good comes from you saying, let me raise up this thing and draw everyone's attention and remind everyone how horrible it has been. Because the truth, like the number one truth and what I learned through that entire year was the sin is not the mistake. The sin is what you do after the mistake and
mhm,
how you leave people or how they feel.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so the thing about definitions, I define a mistake, and to me, a mistake and a failure are not the same. Like, to me, a failure is an outcome.
Right.
Can failure caused by a mistake, or a failure has other causes. But to me, the definition of mistake I come back to is, I did something, or so there's the mistakes of commission. I did something that I thought was good and it turned out to be bad, or I didn't, the mistakes of omission. I didn't do something
Right.
and it led to a bad outcome and I wish that I had. So that's where I was just kind of thinking through of, like, it wasn't a mistake to approach that woman and start the trick the way you normally would.
Right.
And like maybe the mistake, and I'm not trying to beat you up, but it comes back to of like thinking through, it was a mistake to not be prepared for the different ways people might respond other than, okay, I'm game, I'm playing along. 'Cause, I mean, 'cause you talk about being in a bar, people might be drunk and
Yeah.
someone might be belligerent. So do you game plan of like, what if someone says, "Hey, get out of here," and they're cursing? And like, oh, do you just walk away? Or how you've got to kind of game plan that, right?
Well, that you I wasn't going to go through my entire TED talk, but the first one was, right, something happens. Don't raise attention to it. Redirect the room to whatever you want them to, your idea, your passion, your interest, your entertainment. So if something bad happens, don't focus on it. Move to the next thing. But the second thing was, if either something has happened before or something you're afraid is going to happen, then to me, you make a plan. And so over the years, one of the things that I did during that entire time was, how am I going to make sure this never happens again? And then my mind tends to be one that thinks of the thousand negative things. So it could be maddening to be around me sometimes because an idea and I'll go, these are the 8 failure points. And it honestly is that as someone that works with me, it's great because I keep people out of trouble. But it's something that has to live in my head with the like, wow, this is a mistake, or this is happening. This is the problem. I see that threat matrix. And part of that, not to talk too much, but part of that's law school. Because law school is about storytelling. And when I used to go to law, when I went to law school, they tell stories that never have happy endings, right? Well, the contract always fails. The person always loses their leg. The divorce always happens. So you learn about problems that get before the court. So I used to be able to walk into a room and think, oh my gosh, that's a beautiful chandelier. And now I think that damn thing is going to fall. So law school mars you a little bit.
Engineers, I'm an engineer with no legal training other than an intro to law class that I took, my senior year. But I think, engineering does give you this mindset to think about what could go wrong so
Mhm.
that you try to proactively prevent it, right? So there's a time and a place for preventing the mistake or preventing the failure or the harm or tort instead of just reacting to it well. But either way, like let's learn. We can learn proactively or we can learn after the fact. And you make the key point there. Like, how do we not do it again?
I, there is I'm 60, I turned 60 a month ago,
Mhm.
maybe 2 months ago. And I know you're thinking, God, he looks so, right. One of the interesting things as I've gotten further and deeper into thinking about magic, and more importantly, I think thinking about coaching, right? The being in the Navy, being a lawyer, being a magician, a lot of that was about being clever, I think, in my own mind. And as I've gotten older and gotten more into coaching and really realized the thing that feeds my soul is helping the people find their voice. It, but so I look at those things with fresh eyes. So one of the things I find interesting is I've started asking myself a question that I can't know the answer to. And that is, if I could go back and watch myself, is it possible that the way that I showed up was as a cocky 20 something to that woman the way that I showed up caused her to react in that way? And
Uh-huh.
the few data points that I've had is there were some times where I know I got into conflict over ego in my early 20s during that year. So I think it's possible that I was showing up in a way, either because the way that I compensate for feeling vulnerable might have been, and I wouldn't be surprised, probably is, was to show up with more bravado or false bravado that
Or,
evoked reactions.
or,
Or even
or,
more.
or you just ran into a lady who was a smartass. All the
Absolutely. 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 And I can't know other than to have the grace to ask myself the question, which is, as I've gotten older, I don't feel the need to be as right as
Mhm.
I used to be. And so I
Yeah,
can look back and say, okay, what were the things that were going on?
sure. So I'm curious about one parallel to being in court. And again, like, I mean, I've watched enough movies and legal dramas. And I mean, the one thing that comes to mind, I'm going to frame it as a question of like, is this true or is it more complicated than this? Never ask a witness a question you don't know the answer to.
So let me confess. So not all lawyers are trial lawyers. My time in front of the doing prosecution, there were not a lot of those instances where I was having those immense cross examinations. I was in the Alexandria courthouse, and I spent 6 months doing that. I was a trial attorney and doing mostly investigations and doing depositions of people that didn't want to answer questions. And now, because of how I teach, I'm often teaching lawyers how to give opening statements or how to present storytelling. What I find interesting is lawyers, when they look at a case, often when they're junior lawyers, they look at the facts. And so they give it what I call a narrative. This happened. Instead of looking at it and saying, I want to create a story that gets the person across from me emotionally involved. And story is the way that you create emotion and connection. And I think that's the flaw people have. To your point, what I'm often struggling to teach, whether it's lawyers or whether it's engineers or I love economists, is this idea of how do I communicate complex ideas to the person across from me? And so what becomes essential is how do I put things together in the simplest way possible in a story that someone can understand, and then use that as a pivot point to start adding more information. So I find when I'm talking to lawyers that I'm teaching and I'm watching them put their cases together, they just want to throw all this information at the person across from them. And there's this false belief that if I give them enough facts, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
My answer is no. You want to give them the least number of facts, the clearest picture that you can provide, and use there to the largest extent that you can understand them, right? This is also my concern about lawyers is you went to law school, you spent all of your time around people that think and talk about the law. You all have often have a lot of money. You often come from high education. That doesn't necessarily prepare you to have a really important conversation with somebody that's had a completely different life experience. And you're not listening and you're not talking and you're not aware. You may not even realize that what you're saying is not even landing. And to me, that's life. It's sorry. You have to think about law. I think about life. Like, how do I get the person across from me to hear me in a way that presents an idea that I think is important, that helps them act? And to me, whether they're a lawyer, it's in court or out of court, those are the things I find challenging. And I'll come back to magic, attention, focus, perception. That's the through line, is influence.
Yeah. So you didn't answer my question.
Let me ask the question again. I want to make sure I answer.
Do lawyers think that you shouldn't ask a question you don't already know the answer to?
Yes, it is a truism. There are some times that you can ask a question that it doesn't matter how they respond, whereas they're going to look bad no matter what. Like, why did you leave your children home alone with a gun in the house? Right? There's no answer that they're ever going to give that is going to justify that. So there are some instances, but in the vast majority of cases, you don't want to ask questions that you don't know the answer to. And I'm going to give you didn't ask for radio one level deeper.
Please.
So if you're the person putting your witness on, you want that person to tell your story. And this goes back to the are you a good lawyer or a bad lawyer? A good lawyer knows the story that they want to put with their witness. And so they've either worked with the witness or talked to the witness, and they know what's coming in, and they ask questions. What I was saying before, limit the number of facts. You don't want a lot of facts. So I'm using this person to get information to the jury or to the trier of fact or whoever I want in front of me that comes through my question. That's radically different than what I want to do as somebody that's what they do cross-examining. And in cross-examining, I don't want them. I basically want them to affirm what I say. So in a cross-examination, I may have 20 questions. I think shorter cross-examinations are better. I don't ask any question that I don't know the answer to. And usually what I've done is, if they've done a deposition, I not only if they say if they say something I don't expect, then I can say, well, this you said something completely different. Yeah, I'm usually saying, and you were looking at your iPhone when you did this. and you were going 27 miles an hour when this happened, and you actually owed money at the time that this happened. And we're really just getting them to say yes or agree. And I'm really controlling the information that's coming out in the frame that I want it to come out. Now, if they say something in a cross-examination, if they say something that I didn't expect, usually I have a way to discipline them. And that's through a challenge that you would use. On December 27th, you did a deposition, correct? In that deposition, that was closer in time to the time when this violent offense happened. Yes. On that time, you swore that you were going to tell the truth, right? Even as a matter of fact, after we gave you an opportunity to change what you said. Yes. Look on page 7. I've asked you the question, how fast were you going during the time of the incident? You have just said 30 miles an hour. What does it say in front of you? 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Then were you lying then or were you lying now? Yeah, what you're not supposed to say. Anyway.
Sure.
Did I answer your question? Mark, I want to get an A. At the end of it, right. You got an A plus.
You did answer the question, and I gave you a chance to educate us. If what I heard you saying was, you ask a question, you might not know exactly what words are going to come out of their mouth, but you shouldn't be surprised by a fact of the case because if it's something you don't want to come up, you shouldn't be asking about it. And
Correct.
Surprised.
Correct.
Yeah.
When you're doing a cross-examination, if you're good and you've done your homework, you shouldn't be surprised because you should have laid out all the questions. You should be asking questions where they're going to agree.
Yeah.
The challenge, and when you become a really good, what they call it, moving on direct, is that when the person goes off script, that when we're sitting around having cocktails and talking about Nightmare, it's like she, out of nowhere, she admitted that she killed everybody. That's that. It's when you get the unexpected answer that you talked to the client 20 times, you thought you knew the exact story, and then you got them on the stand and they came out of left field with something that you've never heard of. And you're now left with, I don't.
Yeah. And you don't remember what happened after that either.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little more about storytelling because, you're making me think a little bit of my own journey of trying to become a better storyteller as a speaker or as a writer. You talk about wanting to give all of these different details. I'm an engineer. My wife is also an engineer, but she is a better natural storyteller. And she always reminds me, hey, you don't, in a loving, friendly way. That sounded really aggressive, but you don't need you don't always need all of that detail. You tend to give too much detail. I think that's and the engineer trap to think about the facts and the details matter as opposed to what decision, what conclusion do you want someone to draw from the story? What's the goal of your story? What have you? And I'm curious if you've run across someone I've been studying and trying to learn from is a behavioral economist. You mentioned liking economists earlier, Rory Sutherland. No, I think he would younger than Daniel Kahneman. Earlier, little maybe not a generation younger, but did you know of Rory Sutherland?
The name sounds familiar. What ends up happening is everything sort of blends together in my mind. As I become busier and busier, I'm usually like trying to find something on a podcast or and so the names don't always land, but the concepts do.
Okay. Well, so I'll tell you, I wasn't trying to quiz you. It's not, you're not being graded. Relax. It's not lost.
You don't being graded. My days would have to be.
No, but Rory Sutherland is one of the heads of the Ogilvy ad agency in the UK. And one of my great takeaways from seeing Rory Sutherland speak and reading his book is you've got to make that emotional connection first before all else. Don't tell the story sequentially. This happened chronologically, that there's got to be some sort of emotional hook that they've got to feel some sense of like pain in the situation before they even want to listen to a solution, which that sounds obvious in hindsight, but that's something I've struggled with. And I think it's something I've tried to get better at.
There's so much information about stories out there. And we were talking before about lawyers having trouble with stories, which when I say that people are sort of shocked. When I think of story, I'm actually thinking of the classic narrative structure, a 3-act structure. Act 1 ends with the hook, and we'll talk about the hooks. And then Act 2 is the journey, and Act 3 is the resolution. And then for my purposes, I add Act 4. Act
I was
four
going to ask you about that.
act four is clarity. When I teach storytelling to people, I am I'm teaching micro storytelling with a purpose. So what that means is when I teach someone to tell a story, and actually I'm working on a book right now on this. It's
Yeah.
purposeful. I'm telling the story to get an outcome.
Right.
I'm telling the story because I either want to lead, I want to inspire, I want to sell, I want to do something. So in the world we live in, right, with TikTok and everyone, people have short attention. How do I get there quicker? And I'm going to come back to your question. The difference between a story and a narrative, which is just a bunch of facts, is I got this morning and I went to the market and I got pizza and I came home and we ate it. Facts came in.
Yeah.
And I'm going to forgive this example came from a book that I read, and I'm going to apologize to the author. I'm stealing your idea and I'm not giving you credit. And I am so sorry. But the difference is I went to the market because my child was deathly ill and I needed milk and it was closed.
Okay.
It creates this tension that, well, what happened? And so act one it ends with this idea of a hook. And the hook is, what is the thing that causes me to feel uncomfortable or want to know more? So either it begs to be resolved, or it's like, Michael, you do all these things. How do they all fit together? Right. It is that thing that drives interest or wanting resolution on the part of somebody else. So when I'm talking to, go ahead.
So in your story, in your favorite mistake story, did act one end at the point where the woman said, "I don't have any hands"?
Next, it's a micro story and it ends with, I don't have hands. And then everyone goes, if I stop talking at that moment, you go, Michael, you can't fireplay. What? Did she not have hands? Did you like,
Yeah.
so yes, that moment where people leaving go, wait, what happens?
Yeah. Because I did that.
Yeah. You were a perfect audience and I was a perfect storyteller. In that moment, people can see the confluence of those things. So when I talk to somebody about a story, I usually ask, it depends on whether they start talking about a story or whether they say, Michael, we want to start with a consult. What I usually say is, what is your audience and what is your goal? Because that drives all the decisions. And then I will say, what is your story about? And usually when I ask somebody what their story is about, they crystallize the hook in that moment. And if it isn't that, then the next question gives you the hook, which is, what is the action or thing that got you to that point? Those two questions get you the hook of your story.
And then,
it's emotional center you're talking about.
yeah. And so then walk us through the other act two and act three again. So act one is the hook.
All right. So let's finish act one as long as you're going to get the summary of my book, but still buy the book when it comes.
Yeah, please do. I'm going, yes.
So act one is where everybody has the problem. And this is what you're talking about and your wife's talking about, because from our point of view and the things that are important to us, people want to add all of this information. This is where I was in my life, and this is what was going on, and this is what was needed, and this is where I was and how I felt and what I was wearing and what I ate. People need enough information to be oriented with who are the players and where were they in space and time.
Because I get annoyed if someone's telling me a story and they jump in. I'm like, I don't even know why are you telling me this? Who are you? I don't know these people.
Yes. And here's the challenge. The amount of information that if I'm going to do a legal story that I would tell to lawyers would be significantly less than I would tell somebody that was a non-lawyer. So it's not a static decision. Your story of how much act one needs to be is radically affected by your audience and your goals. But the big message I have to people is they need much less. They need much less. And the answer is, to me, I think of stories as tools. So when I tell a story, I'm assuming that I'm going to polish it and use it for a lifetime and pull it off my shelf and continue to use it. So I'll say to somebody, how did that land? What worked? What didn't work? What more did you want? And then to me, it's constantly growing and adapting.
Yeah. There's a feedback loop there.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's act one. I want act one to be enough for people to get enough information to get the hook. And this is for a micro story. If I was turning a story into a stage play, then my act one might be longer, right? My time that I invest in each section depends on what am I doing and why am I doing it. So I'm very mindful and practical about what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Act two is the journey. So
Mhm.
what happened, right? In my story, we jump through act two. We get right to the right. I tell you my emotional state, tell you where I was. And then the resolution is she put her hands on the table. That's act three. And then we kind of talk about a little bit what happens. Act two can go really long, right? So everything that happened or didn't happen, you can add or subtract in that story. To me, the big trick is what I did for you is either I answered two questions. What was my emotional state or what do
Mhm.
you need to know? Let's say, for example, what you tell me your big, well, why don't we do this? Do you have a story? Or is that would be terrible? You told all your stories so many times. What with one of your stories, but I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot.
And I don't know if we have time for that.
Sure. You're
Like,
going to have to
yeah,
have me back.
I'm sorry. Like,
When somebody says, I went on this long journey and this is what I learned here, and this is what I learned here, and this is what I learned here. I just say, tell me what you learned.
yeah,
Like over the 10 years after I had this experience where I learned what was important was it was really about my emotional state. Or you need to know that when I left that courtroom, I hated my wife, right? Just tell me what I need to know. It collapses. And then act three is the resolution. How
yeah,
does it all work out?
yeah,
Now, Act four is this piece when I'm doing something for a business purpose or a selling purpose or a purposes, I don't want there to be ambiguity. So I just tell people what their takeaway is.
mhm,
So this is what I learned from that story. And I do 5 to 7 words. Give give gifts often. Or
yeah,
my big takeaway is you always have to be kind to people. A lot of times I'm helping people do interviews. Like, how do I tell a story in an interview that makes sure I get hired? Give them that 5 to 7 words that you want the interviewer to remember about you. Oh,
yeah,
I always go to my boss when I have challenges, whatever
yeah,
that is.
yeah. So then so in act 4, you're trying to is it fair to say trying to provide clarity without over explaining things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when I say to people, how many times have you gone to a movie and everyone walked out and they saw, you're like, did we watch the same movie? Like everyone's looking at it. They came to different conclusions. No matter how well you tell a story, people have different life experiences. And so they subjectively
Sure.
add different parts to it. It may land in a different way, even though you've told the story the way you want it to, they may have a different takeaway. Don't be, when it's important, don't be accidental. Say, this is how it's changed the way that I work or think or what I learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think in business, it would be a mistake for everyone to leave a presentation with a different takeaway. Maybe
Yeah.
the art of filmmaking, maybe a movie that everyone walks away from with a different perspective on is great filmmaking. Or, you think of like, yeah,
Yeah, it might be. Right. And it goes back to the question that I often say, I'm a dumb rock. What is my goal and how do I get there? And so
yeah,
when I'm talking to somebody about what are they trying to accomplish with their story, I'm getting really clear on what do you want to happen. And what I love is talking to different people. Like I did storytelling for funeral directors. So we talked about
mm,
how do you use story to sell more caskets, or in a lot of instances, how do you help people with grief?
yeah,
I was working with physical therapists the other day. How do you use story in the context of a physical therapy session when you only have 30 minutes and you're trying to inspire this person to do their exercises? Things like that.
okay. So as we wrap up, I mean, I am very curious in advance about your book. And is the focus around, in particular, these micro stories or storytelling more generally?
It's no, it's completely. I think I really struggle. I love stories. I love talking to people about stories. But my question was, do I have something to say that other people don't? And my answer is, I really think being purposeful about stories and learning how to tell micro stories in really powerful ways and having a roadmap about how to do it. We talked about some of the tricks about how to do that. The thing that's getting in the way is I have most of the book written and I know the whole structure. What I think is no matter how cleverly I explain it, what I really need is example after example after example. So I'm now in the process of finding people and say 30 minutes with me.
Yeah,
Tell me your story and let's edit it together. And then it's going to be a section in the book or I'm going to use it as specific purposes. And that's finding those people that are willing to do that with me is really what I'm spending a lot of the time
sure.
working on. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because micro stories as a podcaster, if I'm interviewed on a podcast or on radio, or if I'm doing a training session or giving a talk, like I mean, I use micro stories because you define that as like 30 to 90 seconds, but it still goes through those 4 acts.
Absolutely. Well, you don't always use the four. Like
Right.
as you said before, sometimes I don't care if there's clarity if I know that I'm getting the reaction that I want,
Yeah.
particularly when it's a business purpose or it's some of this heavily commercialized. People want their tagline because I think that's a powerful branding tool. Or if you're in a
Yeah.
job interview and there's 1,000 people, you want people to remember you and remember that thing about you.
Yeah. Great. So, do you have a title for the book as we wrap up?
I've gone through a bunch. It's going to have some variation of micro storytelling and being purposeful. But my best friend and I are fighting, and I have a kid. It's ChatGPT and Claude, and I write the book, and then they tell me what they hate about it, and then I have them play against each other. And so
Yeah.
I have like 5 different titles right now. I'm going to wait till I get to the end, and then I think the title may change.
Sure. That's a hard thing to try to crystallize. And at some point, something will hit you and you go, that's it. But
Yes,
the work
yes.
goes on in the meantime. Again, our guest today, Michael Chaleff. I said that wrong. Chaleff.
Caleb, yes.
Heard it right the first time. That was my mistake. Michael Chaleff, our guest today. The website, we do know this, practicalinfluence.com. I'm sure you can follow his work there or on LinkedIn, and we'll all learn when you announce the title of the book, and we'll learn when it's out. And I'll look forward to reading it because it's going to hopefully make me a better storyteller.
And I would love to get your feedback on the 10X talk. So if
Yeah.
you had a chance to see that, I'd love for you to take a look at it and then let me know what you think about that. Yeah, it was really fun to do. And I made mistakes in there. So maybe I'll come back and we'll talk about all the mistakes I made during my 10X talk.
Okay. But Michael, thank you so much. I didn't want to, I didn't know if it was going to spoil the story to watch the talk in advance. So I'm going to go read it now. You had told me the story in the initial email, but I very much tried to put it out of my mind. So better or for worse, I could react naturally to the story and the way you told it. So thank you for being the first magician, or at least the first person to admit being a magician here on the show. But really enjoyed having you here. And thanks so much for being a guest, Michael.
Thank you. It was a joy.
Thanks.